Start the recordings, and it looks like we got those going. So thank you everybody for joining in. I'm going to try to hit a pace. We only have about 60 slides left, so I'm going to try to get through them all tonight. We are jumping in. What we had covered last time brought us right up to the final encounters with Strahd. We were about to cover them for both parties. We had set the stages of where these fights are taking place, who all the players are, what the arenas look like, and what Strahd's tactics are, and what his preparations have been. So I'm going to jump in from there with just talking a little bit about Prime. So I'll go a couple slides back actually to refresh ourselves of what Prime's arena looked like. We have this situation here. We have Irina in a money pit with Ismark going after her, but with rats, swarms of them bubbling up from under those coins to deal with him. We have vampire spawn coming in through the cracks. We have bat swarms descending from the top of the belfry, and Strahd himself coming to cut off the exit and come in as hard as possible. He is greater invisible, so only Dr. Flint can see him. His first action in the surprise round is to cast his 5th level spell, and I went and looked this up specifically because the whole campaign Talks has been casting high level spells that he got from different source books and really fucking me with them. So I thought, let's flex outside of Strahd's usual playbook a little bit. I'll look up something that I think will really fuck them. And it's this 5th level spell. I can't remember the name of it now. It does like 7d6 psychic damage if you fail an intelligence saving throw, and you like subtract a d6 from pretty much all of your rolls until you get a save every round to kick that condition and then bring it back. So he tries to soften everybody up with this, and then starts using his legendary actions right away to do melee attacks on people who can't see him. And one of the first people to go in initiative happens to be Danica Mardukov, who has been invited to this fight by Prime, and she swings at him and actually manages to hit him and deal damage to him, which he does not appreciate. So he uses one of his first legendary actions on her and crits her and wipes her out from full health immediately. Strahd got a surprise round action and then was able to take legendary actions until his own turn, and he rolled really high initiative. So he is going pretty high up in combat as well. Importantly, one person who did go before him is Cinder, and Cinder activated an ability that she hasn't used too much until now, because it's an ability where, while it is active, any creature... Okay, I'm going to try to say this as correctly as I can. If a creature damages a creature who is adjacent to Cinder, then the person who did the damaging takes an amount of psychic damage equal to Cinder's intelligence modifier. Bloodhunters are an intelligence-based class. It's their mental stat. Mostly they're a physical class, but that's their backup mental stat. And Cinder's intelligence has been not like anything really to speak about through most of this campaign, except for very recently before this fight, Dr. Flint used his alchemist powers to craft her an intelligence headband that made her modifier shoot up to +4. So she has just activated this ability, and then Strahd goes again, and all the PCs are grouped up in one big group, and Strahd still has a lot of hit points, and he decides he is going to go ahead and lay a 4th level fireball on all of them, including himself.
Oh, you're skipping a whole section, but okay.
I'm going to be skipping around to different things, I think, but I have just slides in a certain order, so I'm going to talk about things in a certain order. And I may not talk about everything because there's a lot of beats in these fights. So if you really want to pull something out, you can. But we'll be moving forward. But the important part of this here that is for this slide is that when this 4th level fireball goes off, Erwin Mardukov is sitting over Danica, and he kind of looks up at the rest of the party and says, "Good luck." This fireball kills both of them outright. Erwin has not acted yet in combat at this point, and they are both dead.
Yikes.
So we're moving forward pretty quickly in Prime here. Down in the money pit, Charmed, as one might be already aware, Irina is there kind of to try to divide the party's objectives. She is kind of letting Ismark come after her, and he is trying to get her to kind of snap out of the effect that she is under. What he doesn't know is that she is receiving a save every time that Ismark in particular is damaged by Strahd's allies. So everything that he is shouting at her is not mechanically getting through or like allowing her new saves, but his presence there being chewed on by the rats is. And other people, like other members of the party, she likes them okay, but she doesn't have the relationship with them that she does with Ismark. Actually, if other people had gone down there, she would have made attacks at them with her dinky little rapier. It wouldn't have been anything too crazy. But he turns out to be the only one down there. The rest of the party is not drawn away by this diversion, so he's down in there by himself, distraught at this situation. In Alpha, the dynamic is slightly different, because in Alpha, nobody has see invisibility, so we don't know where Strahd is to start off with, but we do see Irina stroll into the room, and she is telling everybody to stand down, and she seems very obviously charmed. And so this is skipping way ahead because this isn't something that gets resolved immediately, but I'm kind of taking things in turn and how I talk about them. But Van Richten is suspicious of this and kind of desperate to hope that a ploy of his has not gone in vain, and in fact it hasn't. In Alpha, Irina is pretending to have been charmed by Strahd, but actually she is wearing Van Richten's ring of mind shielding that he gave her earlier. Strahd very much wants to believe and expects that Irina would be subject to his charming influence, but she has allowed herself to come this far with him, still in retention of her entire faculties, and as the fight goes on, she will have the chance to reveal that actually fairly early on. Adding some... I'm going to kind of talk about the different allies that Strahd is able to bring to bear in these fights. Some of them appear immediately, as we've already discussed. Others will come in waves. My plan for both groups was that, throughout the castle there are all these different encounters, and anyone that you went and dealt with obviously cannot appear in the final encounter, and then there are a few that will if you have not gone. Like, not all of them would if you didn't touch them. They wouldn't all show up here, but some of them will. And in Alpha, they have not dealt with Strahd's animated armor. I'm still falling because that's just the animation I had on the first slide where he appeared. And he has a great sword that sparkles with electricity, has multiple attacks. He's very strong. He is soloing action and Van Richten in melee. And the way that this fight has kind of gone on, it starts with Strahd going and hitting people really hard in melee, and then misty stepping around and using his legendary actions to move around. He is going from the floor to the balcony and back down. And at a certain point, Nyx gets her sights on this creature and goes, it seems to me like he's held together by magic. I'm going to cast Dispel Magic on him. And Strahd counterspells this. And so the next round, she tries it again. And Strahd counterspells it again, except that this time, Action Jack counterspells his counterspell so that Nyx's Dispel Magic can go through. Most constructs in 5th edition have absolutely no interaction with Dispel Magic. They're like undead in that they have been created by magic, but they're not dependent on enduring magic to continue to animate them. This guy is specifically an exception, which Nyx had no way of knowing. When he has Dispel Magic cast upon him, he gets a saving throw, which he fails, and with 90 hit points left, he falls apart completely, destroyed. Wow. So, wiped out pretty early on in that fight. A pretty early complication that Prime has to deal with is following in where they originally came from. Somebody starts attacking at them from around the corner. Somebody is using their action to attack and then their bonus action to slip back into stealth. But they determine that it is the Vistani Erigal, who has been enlisted by Strahd to help him in this final encounter. Erigal works for Strahd, has throughout the whole campaign, is kind of the villain among the Vistani. His brother Luvash is also not a really great guy, but Erigal has the stats of an assassin. He is a very deadly threat. He does a bunch of sneak attack damage. He does a bunch of poison damage, and he's just a really not a good guy to have. Especially if he's not your main threat. If he's your main threat, you can kind of gang up on him and work him down, but he can pour on a lot of damage from the sidelines. So it becomes clear that with him also covering the exit, he's going to have to be dealt with at some point. Another person who appears during the course of the battle for Alpha is Escher, who is still alive in this fight, and he comes in and he's still wheeling and dealing. He starts trying to negotiate during the battle, like, "Oh, Strahd, do you want me to help you out, Lord Strahd? Well, what's it worth it to you? I want some specific promises of ways that my station will increase over the as a result of my actions." And Strahd starts yelling at him, and we get a better idea of their dynamic a little bit, and before any kind of agreement can really be reached, they run up to Escher and they do a bunch of damage to him. Action smacks the shit out of him, and
I think I crit him with the Sun Sword.
yeah, and it intimidates him, which is like the second time in the campaign where Action has intimidated somebody who was like deserved it. like an NPC in a way that mechanically helped the party, and just basically says, "Get out of here." And Escher immediately leaves, and he not only flees the castle, he is able later to flee Barovia entirely. It is specifically stated in the ending the campaign chapter that Escher very well might escape and go and just do Escher stuff. Like, he's one of the people who might go do another plot line somewhere off in the world. And is somebody who will go make something of themselves outside this campaign. So he is forcibly removed from this situation. I am not going to go totally beat by beat through the whole fight because there are just so many moments. And I think that this is the kind of fight that if y'all want to talk about it later to one another, there are all kinds of moments of heroism and cool, clutch, tense moments that we can go over. I think some of them I might be able to go over really quickly in slides coming up here. So even as I work later on into the fight, I'll try to work my way back to something if it turns out to be super clutch for understanding what comes next. But at some point later on in the Alpha fight, there is someone else who appears on the battlefield. And this time it's not an ally of Strahd's. It is Esmeralda Davenier crashing, as is her wont in Alpha, through a stained glass window to tumble down into the battlefield immediately next to Strahd, immediately making a full round of attacks upon him, heavily bloodied. This is the first time we've seen her since she took a last stand to slow down the Vistani so that Van Richten and Irina could escape on Hot Dog's back. And she has returned, and she is combatively swinging at Strahd, but he takes this in stride. And he seems, in fact, to not be entirely surprised by this, because, as it turns out, this has all been according to his design, or so he claims. Esmeralda seems very upset and very stressed here, possibly because of the many injuries she's already sustained on the way here, and the effort she's obviously gone through to get here. But Strahd knows that there is something else going on, because Strahd knows a piece of Esmeralda and Van Richten's history, and has known it for a while. And this is the culmination of his plan to attempt to drive the two of them apart. When Van Richten was a husband and a father, and his son Erasmus went missing, in a land far from this one, he went looking for his son and found that his son had been kidnapped by Vistani who were traveling through and sold, traded for favors to a vampire named Baron Metis. When he broke into the castle and tried to rescue his son, he found that he was too late, that Erasmus had already been taken by the vampire and was beyond rescuing. He battled the vampire and slew him, put his son to rest, and turned darkly to thoughts of revenge against the Vistani. This began a kind of a winding career of vengeance against them that also became a career of vampire hunting. He lost his family over this traumatic episode and in his solitude delved into this obsession. It eventually led to him stalking a Vistani tribe at night when he was encountered by a strange and terrible creature, a lich out in the woods with an army of zombies. This lich, rather than kill Rictavio, saw this sort of dark fury in him and asked for his story. And when he heard it, he said that he would help him. With no strings attached, he volunteered that Van Richten could take his army of the undead and lead them upon the Vistani encampment in order to take his revenge. Van Richten took him up on this offer, and in the dead of night, he led these undead upon the camp, and they slaughtered every man, woman, and child. The final one of them to die, a female Vistani elder, cursed Van Richten, saying that anyone who loved him would be torn apart by the claws of monsters. What Van Richten didn't know, and he wouldn't know for a long time, is that actually there was one survivor of this tribe who escaped this slaughter, was found later by other Vistani and raised by them. And this young girl eventually, having heard that Van Richten was so wronged by the Vistani in a rebellious teenage phase, feeling like she didn't really belong with the Vistani either, would seek him out and seek to become his apprentice as a way of repaying the wrongs done to him by the Vistani, not knowing that he was responsible for the destruction of her tribe. She believed that this was also something they had in common, that undead had torn their families away from them. Van Richten did know the truth and kept it from her for years as he trained her as his apprentice, until eventually, believing that his curse was such a great threat to her, he ordered their separation and abandoned her. Esmeralda went on without knowing the truth for many years, but Strahd, with his many resources, including his connections within the Vistani, learned the truth, and told that truth to Erigal and to Luvash, relatives of Esmeralda, and instructed them to find an opportunity to separate her from the others, capture her if possible, and do nothing to her but tell her the truth of what happened. They have succeeded at this. And their instructions after that were to allow her ultimately to escape, to find her way back to Van Richten. And that has come to its culmination here. And as Strahd tells her that he knows now what she knows, and that she is putting on a brave face to fight him, but he is aware of the torment in her heart, it is his turn next, and he, because she has disadvantage on her save because of Van Richten's curse, successfully charms her. And she turns her weapons and her spells against the party, or rather, against one member of the party in particular, Rudolf Van Richten. One item that both parties found and both decided to leverage in the final fight was a scroll of protection from undead. I think that's what it's called. This creates a sort of column of a safe zone. It's like a 10-foot radius force field effect, and undead have to succeed as an action at a DC 15 charisma check, which is difficult for any undead, even one who has good charisma, who doesn't have proficiency in the saving throw. And Strahd does not have proficiency in this saving throw, although he does have a +4 modifier. In Prime, they use this in a pretty small room, and the whole party is kind of able to go back to back within this space to create a place where Strahd cannot get in and his vampire spawn cannot get in. An unfortunate side effect is that their most potent ally is also frozen outside of it. So in Prime, we have created a situation where Sir Godfrey is soloing a bunch of vampire spawn by himself, while everybody else is doing whatever potshots they can at them or at Strahd. We have most of the party collect up inside of here. It's a little bit frantic, sliding everybody inside and away from other dangers, but we collect all the major members inside. Unfortunately, one of Strahd's minions is able to get to us in here, and that's all the swarms of bats which have descended from the belfry, and they are still harrying the, especially the squishy people inside this area. But this is kind of the landscape that emerges on the Prime battlefield, which creates a situation that Strahd is going to have to work around. In Alpha, we also create this force field, and I think in immediately after it's formed, Strahd has enough available action economy that he just tries to punch through it and immediately succeeds. So it does sap one of his turns, which is super valuable, but it doesn't hold out in quite the same way it does for Prime. It's going to be several rounds before Strahd thinks it's worth his while to test a charisma save against this effect. In Alpha, a emergent factor in this fight that I'm having to consider is that Nyx has gone to great lengths to reunite Strahd with his well-preserved undead family members. And I really wanted this to be worth something, but they are not capable of speech, and there is kind of a complex web of like emotions with the various relationships here. Certainly if I had like a rage meter for Strahd, it ticks up, upon seeing them. And I'm keeping in mind, like as he's doing tactics and all, that it may be making him more chaotic and less logical to simply have them here. But the main way that I'm implementing this is that he will not allow harm to come to these creatures. He will not throw any fireballs that include them in their area of effect. Even if these creatures are really getting in the way or like really taking down his minions. As actually, we've been fighting animated suits of armor. These zombies have been absolutely pulling them apart. And it would be very easy for Strahd to run over and just take these zombies out and then have those minions available for him again. But it's something he doesn't even consider because he's hoping he can get through this whole fight without their bodies destroyed in any way so that he can peacefully lay them back in state when the fight is over. So they're kind of jamming up his ability to control the battlefield. Certainly it is preventing him from fireballing Nyx, which I hope was worth it in and of itself.
It was worth it. It was worth it for the memes.
Perfect. Another emergent factor in Alpha is that another creature partway through the fight joins, coming up the stairs from the crypt where she had been ordered some time ago, and they'd been told about this. The abbot had told her to descend until she found a wall and then just stand there facing it. She seems now, in violation of those orders, to be encroaching on the battlefield. Vasilka, the flesh golem, emerges onto the field, and for the first time, speaking with raspy, stitched-together vocal cords, says, "Hey guys! It's me, the ghost of Daniel! I've come to help!" And with Daniel's mind, with his ghost possessing Vasilka's form, comes to the aid of the party, wielding her slams, and she has really high hit points, and is a potent melee force on the battlefield toward the end. Another factor in the alpha fight, which emerges from the chapel being the place that was selected by the cards as their final encounter space. There is an item in the chapel that Alpha's had a little bit of back and forth on what's going on with it already, but we see when Strahd ends up fighting close by to it that he misses an attack on Van Richten that it really seems like should have hit, like something interfered with Strahd's attack, and he looks at this icon, this silver figurine that's sitting on the dais, and he's like, blast, like I forgot about that there. I just should have had it removed long ago. And he afterwards seems to try to take the fight away from it. The icon of Ravenloft is a powerful magic item that just exists here, and it is sitting on the altar and has not been moved from it. This is an item, as I mentioned earlier, that if an evil creature touches it, does an incredible amount of damage to them. So you can understand why Strahd might be hesitant to pick it up and carry it around willy-nilly. But it gives all undead within 30 feet disadvantage on all of their attacks. Something that I don't really know the adventure considers as being a factor if you have a fight in the chapel. It's certainly not written anywhere in the chapel's description to be aware of that. It is just something that I realized while reading the description of this item. But Strahd starts sending his animated armors to go and pick up the icon and move it to the far end of the room, motivating NPC allies like Ismark to chase after them to try to destroy them, reclaim the icon, and bring it back to Strahd. Something that will ebb and flow over the course of the fight. In Prime, Talks, as I mentioned once previously, has a spell, which I think is from Fizban's Treasury of Dragons. Talks, can you remind me what kind of dragon it was that you summoned with this spell? That's a Derek question. Do I have Derek?
Is Derek here?
Yeah,
I see him.
Here. I just had my phone muted. I didn't have my character sheet up, so I couldn't remember off the top of my head.
Okay, if you can't, that's all right.
Lunar dragon
It's
or something?
it's like a amethyst dragon or a moonstone dragon or something. Derek has gone and he's looked through and he found that this one spell from this one book allows you to summon different dragons from a list of dragons and control them. And one of them has a radiant damage breath weapon that gives you a Constitution save for half damage. Strahd is super good at these saves, and even if he wasn't, could use his legendary resistances to automatically succeed, but even when he succeeds the save, he still takes half the radiant damage. And when Strahd takes any radiant damage, his 20 regeneration doesn't kick in. So this 2d6 breath weapon getting halved every round is canceling his regeneration entirely, and it's a whole nother force on the battlefield to have to reckon with. So Strahd is starting to fight this dragon because it has to be like have its own hit points taken out in order to work it down. And Strahd actually, I had set myself up for this and then forgot to follow through on it. He is early on pretty heavily damaged in Prime. In the first couple of rounds, they deal a lot of damage to him that he has to spend subsequent rounds earning back. One of the ways this happened is, hey, remember when he dropped a 4th level fireball on everybody that killed the Mardikovs? So that was super bad, but also it didn't go exactly how Strahd would have wanted. He does succeed the save and take half damage, which is not insignificant to him. He has a lot of hit points, so he's feeling like, I can tank this.
To be clear.
What's that?
He hit, because he dropped it on himself.
Yeah, he centered it on himself in order to hit the entire party without also hitting his minions in the other room. And while he did this, he was standing next to Cinder. And Dr. Flint was standing next to Cinder, and Hellbender was standing next to Cinder, and Shava was standing next to Cinder. Remember how Cinder had this ability where when you hit somebody standing next to her, you took psychic damage equal to her intelligence modifier? So, including Strahd himself, there were 5 characters standing adjacent to Cinder who he damaged with his fireball. And Cinder has, because of her headband that Dr. Flint made for her, +4 intelligence. So Strahd takes, in addition to his own half of his fireball damage, he takes 20 psychic damage from just that ability, which he
Spicy.
could not see coming, could not mitigate in any way. So that took him from like, okay, I'll crisp myself a little bit and work my way back to being, okay, maybe that was a mistake. Jesus Christ, what just happened? So they started to put him on the back foot. Dr. Flint also is able to dispel because he can see him, is able to dispel his greater invisibility and his fire shield fairly early on. He doesn't actually have those for most of this fight. He has them for a little bit longer in Alpha, where they are eventually dispelled as well. So he doesn't get nearly as much mileage out of either of those as he would have hoped. But he is... even with this radiant damage coming in from this dragon, he is eventually able to take this dragon down, though at great cost to himself. The rest of the party is pretty divided in the different threats they are trying to combat. Dr. Flint is healing people pretty much every round because we have some squishy people who keep taking a bunch of damage. We have bats harrying pretty much everybody from above, especially the casters who have fewer hit points. Cinder, I believe it was, goes after Aragol and does like 2 full rounds on him, at which point he goes, okay, all right, maybe I'll take a step back. And she is able to push him out of the fight. Sir Godfrey solos half of the vampire spawn on his own, and his only frustration is that Strahd keeps running away. He can't get to him. Strahd is moving up to Godfrey on his turn, punching him twice, and then punching him once again with a legendary action, and then using 2 legendary actions to spider climb away up the walls. And Godfrey is pissed that he can't get to him, but he's smiting the shit out of these vampire spawn and keeping them down over here. So they are handling things, and it's actually not too long before all the vampire spawn are destroyed and gone, which is creating some space, certainly, for other things to happen. The bats are eventually annihilated as well. Aragol,
After knocking Shava out.
whoops away. But Shava is knocked out and just barely picked back up. Tox also took some damage because Strahd was getting the bats to focus him to try to break concentration on the dragon, but he managed to hold it up the entire time, so the dragon had to get knocked down instead. Or I think Tox did eventually get knocked out and lose concentration and had to be picked back up as well. So the 2 of them are at extremely low health when Strahd finally comes and uses an action and makes a charisma save to, on his first try, push his way through the barrier. He is upon these 2 who have very low health, and they have been doing such bullshit to him this entire fight that he has made it clear he is going to focus them down now.
I think I've charmed him like twice at this point.
Yeah, with your Fey ability, you managed to get it so that he could not attack you directly. I think
in the other room for a bit.
I think that lasted for like 1 round, though, so I think it's worn off at this point. Isn't that right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So he descends to the 2 of them with his final legendary action on this particular round, and on his turn, he is going to do melee attacks on the 2 of them and then do legendary actions, and he is going to knock them out and then continue hitting them upon the ground with whatever he has. But before it can be his turn again, it is Shava's turn, and Shava holds the Sword of Sunlight in one hand, and in the other hand she holds the Staff of Frost, which they retrieved from the Amber Temple. And at point-blank range, she casts Cone of Cold directly into Strahd, who still has plenty of his legendary resistances left, but it doesn't matter. His hit points are too low, and Tox's dragon has done its job for this round and cancelled his regeneration. And with Shava having Strahd within the area of the Sword of Sunlight, he cannot turn into mist. When he takes this damage, he is frozen. The stones behind him are blasted apart by the ice. He cracks and shatters and is gone. In Alpha, all of his minions have been destroyed He is surrounded on all sides by various characters. Lucian is up there with his homunculus, like shooting lasers down out of its eyes. We have managed to break Esmeralda out of her charm. She and Van Richten are fighting side by side now. Irina has revealed that she is not charmed. She and Ismark have the icon of Ravenloft and bring it close to Strahd. He has been chasing Nyx around for a couple of rounds because she keeps dispelling and counterspelling his shit, and he wants to get her. And she has just been running away for all she is worth, and she has successfully eluded him. Action has been chasing him with the Sword of Sunlight, trying to get it on him. Finally, he is on the lower level here, and Action is on him. Strahd runs away from Action, but Daniel, in the body of Vasilka, says, give me an alley. And these two buddy cops, they do a little sword switch. We throw it over to Daniel, who has it next to Strahd, so it's canceling his regeneration again. And Peregrine casts Shatter as Strahd stands before the stained glass windows of the chapel, and the windows all explode, and as glass rains down, and Strahd stands in the radius of the Sword of Sunlight. He cannot regenerate, he cannot turn to mist, he fades away to nothing and is gone. And for both parties, shortly thereafter, the sun shines on Barovia once more. The clouds part and the mist rise. I will mention that in the very final round in Alpha, Julia shoots a laser at Strahd, and before I confirm that she hits, and before she can roll her damage, her internet cuts out. And I'm extremely stressed by this because, yeah.
And it never happened like this before.
Yes.
It's just like,
and it's super, super crucial how much damage was done by that hit, because his hit points are so low, and it's gonna be his turn after two more people, so I need to know if he survives to his turn. And she is not making it back, and Duncan every 5 seconds is saying, could we stop for the night? Like, is this a good stopping point? I'm so tired.
I was also at day 4 of a conference, and my brain was dribbling out of my ears, and I was like, man, I know things are really heating up, but like Julia's internet just cut out, and we can't hear from her, and like we're like 30 minutes. I'm about to fall asleep, and Alan is just like, could you just wait?
But what if you waited a little longer?
Yeah.
What if we just waited like a little longer? And eventually I picked it up, and I was like, okay, yes, okay.
I'm thinking this whole time that Julia is, of course, frantically trying to get back on the system and should be getting back on the call at any moment. I know what none of them know, which is that Strahd has 4 hit points left, and that it's Peregrine's turn and then his turn.
I was fighting with the app and the computer instead of just opening it up on my phone and getting back on the call, which I would have done but I thought he wasn't just like, he wasn't low. I thought he was going to turn into a dragon. And we would have
I kind of was expecting a third health bar, and Alan was also playing cards close to his chest very reasonably about like his
I didn't think the end was
status.
ever coming. So I was just like,
Lucian,
sorry guys. I'm
Lucian
working on
do
this
at
one.
least 4 damage with his cantrips.
After the not 4 damage before Lucian hit him. 4 damage like after because it was a situation where he rolled the wrong damage for what the ability actually was, and like if it was one thing it would be 4, but it couldn't possibly be like there was someone else in there. It added up to something, and I was with Duncan. I was like, Duncan, do you want to just take your turn? And he's like, maybe we just. I'm like, what if you just like cast Shatter, Duncan? And he's like, well, maybe I'll shoot a firebolt. I'm like, what if you cast Shatter? What if you just said that you cast Shatter, and then nothing else would matter?
And I was like, okay, yeah. Absolutely.
But unfortunately, Julie was not back on the call when that happened. So,
Yeah.
well.
When I got back on the call, everybody was like, so...
You never got back on the call. We had to talk about it next time. We had to message you and be like, Julia.
Yeah, because like, what were we gonna do? Recreate it the next time? No, like we basically were just like, we have to tell you over text.
Yeah.
We're so sorry.
And like, maybe if I'd been less panicked, I would have, because I really didn't want to start the next session. Because like the start of the next session, people were like talking about like the Beetlejuice movie or some shit like that, and then they're like, "Okay, let's start off. All right, I kill Strahd." Just the very first thing that happens.
You read the situation as well as any possible that you could.
Yeah.
All right, can I jump in on how we dispelled his invisibility? Because it was really cool.
Please jump in.
All right. So I tried to cast Dispel. I only had, I think, 2 third-level spells, and I tried to cast a Dispel Magic on him immediately because I was the only one, of course, who could see him. And he immediately counterspelled it. And I was like, "Fuck! We need to proc his reaction somehow." And then Cinder goes onto the ethereal plane using one of her Blood Hunter abilities, which she has barely used before because it only lasts a number of rounds equal to your intelligence modifier, which before was 1, I'm pretty sure. So it's like, I think she used it to go through a wall like once or twice. But this time it would last 4 rounds, which is like forever. So she goes onto the ethereal plane where she can see the invisible Strahd, and is able to attack him. And Cinder makes really good attacks and rolls really well, and he has to cast Shield, and she misses that first attack, but then still hits with, I think, all of her other attacks, which is part of why he gets really bruised early on. And he has used his reaction, so then I cast Dispel Magic, and I get rid of his invisibility and his Fire Shield, because that's just Dispel Magic dispels all the shit that's on you.
And this was something that I only realized from you calling that out after we had been through a full Dispel Magic gauntlet in this fight in Alpha, where we hadn't realized that. So we had a situation actually where Nyx, we only realized later, we were like, oh, you actually did a Misty Step and a Dispel Magic in the same turn. And there was such a distance between those two decisions that nobody noticed it until later. And oh, that was a fault. But also then I realized that she was supposed to dispel like everything with one Dispel Magic as opposed to just one thing. So I was like, oh, let's call it good. That's fine. So that's a really tough difference between the games I'm used to in 5th edition, how Dispel Magic works differently there. But also I fully could have, I had fully flubbed some decisions early on around keeping up concentration on greater invisibility. I allowed Strahd to drop it in a situation where I really, really shouldn't have, because I was really not managing my resources very well. So I was feeling bad about that. But
the only other really big beat, I think, in our fight is that right before Strahd comes down and breaks the barrier, his second to last desperate move is that he casts his, I think, his last fireball. And that was going to hit basically all of us, and especially the 2 casters were really low, and were like becoming really important in this fight because of the dragon.
I think I went down.
Yeah, I think you still went. Yeah, that's what took you down. Actually, it was, or maybe it was the bats immediately after that. But no, the fireball didn't, because you managed to take, you, I think, specifically counterspelled the fireball, because it was a 4th level spell, and your spell was 4th level, but your spell was 4th level, which meant you had to roll to beat his, and I think you got like just barely better than you needed or something. Or like we were able to add something to roll. Maybe it was
was it Godfrey's inspiration?
It was Godfrey, like let you add something to the roll or something.
Mm-hmm. Re-roll it,
and
yeah.
That's why you succeeded. I don't remember, but it was like we were all like, since the fireball didn't go off.
I did go down immediately after, though, because
I think the bats took you out.
had managed to get within range of you because I was really low.
Yeah. And so then I hit the bats, and that healed you.
Yeah, and then from the ground, Strahd is coming down. I don't even bother getting up, and I kind of told him, Alan, did I need to do my max damage thing to get him to go down in that one, or...
No, but I knew you would never need to cast any spell again for the rest of the campaign, so I ordered you to use your maximize ability that you had never used. And I'm sorry.
Onto it.
She was like, maybe I'll need it for something else, and I was like, for something else?
Well, okay, I forgot that the Sword of Sunlight prevented him from doing his Misty thing.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And so I thought we were going to have to bolt downstairs and beat the shit out of him again.
And this was a point of confusion in both campaigns. I think the fact that this ended the fight was not something that had really fully sunk in for either group, because as with Alpha, not realizing that this moment was going to be the end of the fight, it comes as a bit of a shock to suddenly be like, is that it? And the sunlight filters in through the windows and the mists are gone, and the color and the feeling of the air in Barovia changes, and the storms stop, and there's a bit of a feeling like, is that really it? And that's a feeling that will stay with us through the rest of the epilogue. We go through a number of moments, some of which happen with both parties. I had space for both parties at the end to kind of do whatever things they want to do to wrap things up, but some things are just going to happen. One of them is that Irina has an encounter where a spirit appears before her. And this is written in the book that the spirit of Sergei appears and says to her basically, hey, like our spirits are free now. We can be together at last. And in Alpha, of course, this moment looks a little different. And he says, hey, baby. And I have to pretend like I've seen an episode of Johnny Bravo in the last 25 years as I do an impression of him. And in the book, she goes with him, and they both kind of ascend and turn into sparkles and are gone. And I couldn't do that at the end of this game. And I kind of felt like that ending kind of missed a whole point to everything that's going on. It matters a little bit how you read into the literalism of reincarnation here, because in the book, Irina's like, yes, my soul remembers you, like we are meant to be together, and kind of these soulmates are able to be together at the end and ascend together, and it's like Tatiana and Sergei being able to be together. I really feel like there's a big case here for Irina being her own fucking person. And so that's how I ran it in this game. And also, if we have Strahd as the archetype of man who's like, these girls only want to be with like the hot, pretty guys. They don't appreciate guys like me who like suffer to like provide for stuff and like all my dark thoughts and everything. Then Sergei kind of showing up at the end here and just expecting her to be with him is the guy who's kind of like, hey, you know, like, I don't know, like, we how much could we have possibly changed in the last 400 years? I've been thinking about you the whole time and have been able to do absolutely nothing to, like, keep up with you or how much you may have changed. But, like, things are all still exactly the same, right? Or, you know, alternatively being like, I had a person that I was in love with, or I had a vision of a person that I wanted to be with, and this being the happy ending of the story, we should be together. And I felt like there was space there for Irina to be like, no, that's not what I want from this. Like, both of you were chasing an image of a person who just doesn't exist. Tatiana is gone. I'm not Tatiana. I'm me. And I need to have a chance to figure out who I am outside of the fucking fucked up baggage of all of this. I'm sorry, but the woman that you loved is gone. And
I get where you're coming from.
Yeah.
I get where you're coming from, but wouldn't it have been like funny if like Strahd was like vindicated? Like like Sergei's just the worst and she's kind of the worst too.
That would be really funny. Or if she was at the end like, oh man, Strahd actually was like super hot and rich, and I'm like super bummed now. I had a 180 as soon as I was out of y'all's company. Yeah, I mean, for the meme, there's a lot of directions we could have gone, right?
When you run this game a third time, Alan, you could do that.
Yeah.
Fourth time.
Yeah. But it's interesting because I do feel like,
And Julia.
yeah. I do feel like there's a spin you could put on that moment where it could still work and could be enchanting and romantic. My favorite part about it is how fucking devastated it leaves Ismark. Like, he's been fighting for her this whole time, and then the first time so this cloud dude shows up, she's like, all right, goodbye forever. Like, he's not even in that cutscene. Like, oh, all right, you know, figure out something else to rotate your life around, I guess, Ismark. Jeez. There is, in fact, a scene that can happen written in the book if you get Irina to Krezk. I mentioned in passing to each party, there is like a sacred fountain there. And this scene, it comes out of fucking left field in this book. If Irina approaches that sacred fountain, Sergei's spirit rises up from it, and he's like, Irina, like, Tatiana, be with me. And she's like, oh, okay. And she, like, goes into the pond and just, like, fucking vanishes and is gone forever, reunited with Sergei. And Strahd is instantly aware of this and throws a bolt of lightning into the pond. And if you're standing too near it, then you're hit by it. Like, his rage manifests like that. And then he just tries to seek you to kill you in his anger. There is no indication anywhere else in the story that this could happen. There is no way to be ready for it. So I was like, don't fucking take her to Kresk, so I don't have to think about this. There's no reason for her to be there. Also, there's, like, why would she be here? She wants to go to Vallaki, has no particular, just, I guess if you're jerking her around. So that was also, I think, left a taste in my mouth, like, what if that didn't happen? What if we did not play out a moment like that? So give you guys a window into that. Another thing that happens when the mists rise is that all of those who live in Barovia but do not have souls, what the book says is that they're actually fine if they stay in Barovia, but if they try to leave, then they evaporate into mist. And I was like, no, they just evaporate into mist right now, because their whole existence is fucked up anyway. And also, like, it's just actually more cruel for them to be like, oh, yes, we can leave. And then they try to and turn into mist. And then they're like, oh, dang, I guess we can't. And, like, you know, they have families who care about them, and their family members would be like, no, we thought we were all about to leave together. We packed and walked all the way to the edge of the realm. and now they're gone. More dramatic to simply have them all turn into mist at once. Especially this guy. And Alpha hears the story later about what happened here, because while their encounter with Strahd was going down, Victor, who was last seen yeeted from their cart nearby Vallaki, has made it into town, and he has made it to the hut where his father and mother are being held prisoner, the burgomaster and burgomistress X of Vallaki. He murders his father, and he is walking toward his mother with a knife, asking her, do you love me? Would you do anything for me? And she is pleading with him, saying, yes, of course, absolutely. And he says, good. And as he raises the knife, Strahd is destroyed, and he evaporates into mist.
Wow.
And Alpha is left to...
So does she, right?
No, she has a soul and is fine, if, you know, not fine at all after this, but she survives. And we're left to kind of wonder about what exactly has been going on with Victor this whole time, and how did it come to this particularly? Irina and Ismark are alive at the end of the game in both games, and are able to kind of pack up and move out to find a life outside Barovia. I think that Ismark does... I forget exactly what we determined. Does he stay as burgomaster in Alpha, or do they kind of pack out? I felt like maybe they packed out.
I don't remember. They either did that or they went back to Barovia Village, one of the two.
Yeah, I think that Ismark, like, was willing to set somebody up as, like, a longer term burgomaster, like with his training, and like somebody who would hand select, so that kind of legacy is preserved. But I think he and Irina are both kind of like, we're gonna go like find a life for ourselves outside of this place. Like our whole lives have been defined by the tragedy of this environment, and we really just want a new start, somewhere where we can be normal people. They have managed to weather this entire thing without actually becoming like combat heroes themselves. So they can kind of just be normal people after this. That is kind of the ending that they get. The Dusk Elves depart the valley in both games, finally able to leave. And many of the Barovians also leave the valley forever. Something that happens in Alpha that I decide to do that I don't do with Prime, because Alpha has explored quite a bit more of Castle Ravenloft than Prime. And the only marker I had for whether this moment would happen or not is that they opened one particular crypt and investigated enough to be like, okay, this crypt is dangerous. There's all this brown mold in here, so if we enter, it will do a bunch of cold damage to us, and it's really difficult to remove. We're just not going to deal with that right now. But given the fact that they did get to it in-game, I decided to follow through on this after the game. If you are able to remove that brown mold, you discover a magical sword beneath it. This is a luck blade, a item that contains within it the ability to cast one time ever the Wish spell. And we spend some time in our epilogue debating what possible uses of this spell we could have, but as this spirals into indecision, another moment kind of comes to the forefront where Luke, as Van Richten, finds it incumbent upon himself to explain himself to Esmeralda and try to do what he can to repair this relationship. I have been feeling really, really bad this whole time about how invested Luke has been in the Van Richten and Esmeralda relationship, and how at every turn I have absolutely punished him for it. But he has made it clear that he is willing to stand his ground, and like he still feels like he can't explain everything to her. He wants so badly to repair this, but feels so limited in the ways that he can do it, and she is demanding answers of him, and he is expressing like affection and giving patience, but he's still not explaining himself that well. And finally she reaches over suddenly and grabs the luck blade from action, and she says, whatever it is that is keeping you from being honest with me, I wish that it would go away. Wish is the only level of spell that can permanently remove Van Richten's curse. And with her words, it is banished, and he feels immediately that he is free of it forever.
It was very sweet. Thank you.
In Prime, we don't really get too much into any of this, and the two of them kind of split up and go their separate ways in the epilogue of all of this. They have kind of a bit of a begrudging reunion, but this is a whole storyline we don't get into, and we don't reach quite this level of catharsis and healing and reparation between the two of them. This was something that really had to be fought for. And it was only because you went to such lengths to show Esmeralda that some part of you did want to make things right by her, that she felt like it was worthwhile to give that back.
I say, when she did confront me, when she was charmed,
yeah,
she was pointing her sword at Rudolph Van Richten, about to kill him, and I decided that he's so messed up that he would rather, like, die than tell the truth or say he's sorry. So that's just what he did. He's like, you can kill me. And that, like, that's what stopped her being charmed.
And that was a really pivotal moment to, like, see that you would give her that outlet for her anger and her feelings and not try to defend yourself or try to avoid it. Like, you fully let her stab you in the chest. And that is what allowed her to overcome the enchantment that had been put upon her. That was the catharsis that she needed.
How I plan to raise my daughter. Just kill me.
In Prime, we have another.
That was one of the sections. Sorry, I was just gonna say that was one of the sections of that entire like big Strahd fight. That was like, wow, that is so cool. I am just running after this man. I've just been chasing Strahd. I've been levitating to try to get to the balcony and chase him, and then he just
Yeah.
jumps down immediately. I'm over here like crying, and all this other stuff is happening. I'm exhausted. I'm like, oh great, that's great, Luke. That's so good. I gotta stab this guy now.
I think, like, Alan, you were controlling Ismark. Like, it was Ismark's turn right after that, and you said, like, Ismark was like, what the fuck is going on? And then, like, just he leaves to fight.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's like a moment where Ismark's like, what the hell is going on with those? I'm like, forget, ignore it, fight Strahd, so we don't have to. Help me fight Strahd.
In Prime, we have another relationship that needs repairing, but we have done what is necessary to bring a great amount of healing back to the orders of the members of the Order of the Silver Dragon. From Castle Ravenloft, we were able to bring back the skull of their founding lord, Argynvost, the Silver Dragon who founded their order and who was killed by Strahd in combat when Strahd came with his minions to wipe out the forces of Argynvostholt. The dragon's remains were taken not into his rightful tomb that he had prepared for himself, but deep into Ravenloft. But now, with those remains returned, the beacon of Argynvostholt can be lit, which radiates through the entire country. And also with the beacon lit and with the mists removed, the souls of these revenants can pass on. But before they do, sanity is returned at last to Vladimir Horngard, and he is able to thank Godfrey for the force of will that he showed, the dedication he showed, not just holding true to his ethos as a member of this paladin order, but for never abandoning Vladimir, for still believing in him after all this time, and returned to his senses and recognizing Godfrey for the first time in centuries. The two of them passionately make out with their dead, rotting lips and tongues just rolling over each other. They just really, really get into it. This was something Carter knew about the whole time and I thought a fantastically good job, just because I was just like, yeah, he comes in close to you and you were like we kiss. Like just totally unbothered having this in your pocket and just going with it. I was so pleased.
Alan, I have done such a good job at blocking this out of my mind. It's like the first time I'm hearing about it.
I remember it really well. Carter floored me.
Yeah. These two canonically gay, and they turn and they wave to the party, and both of them ascend spirits together off into the ether of their lawful good afterlife. And that's the end of Curse of Strahd. Or
There were other things.
Or
I had a lot of fun with that too because I turned off my camera.
Nice try, Alan.
Yeah,
It's-
no.
it's the end of Curse of Strahd, or is it? And
At least one more party then.
this is where,
I was also gonna say they did go back to kill the Lich.
well, okay, we're going to talk about that. This is where I'm actually going to start telling you some things to begin with. I think the way that I want to do this is that first I'm going to make some confessions, and I'm going to talk about some stuff from my process. And I'm going to talk about the canonical ending of Curse of Strahd first, and talk about things that I changed, and then we will talk about each of your endings in order. So, the canonical ending of Curse of Strahd is that all of this happens. You destroy Strahd, characters get their various epilogues, people leave Barovia, people, ascend to different positions of power or whatever. But then, after some months, Strahd returns. The dark powers resurrect him. I'm going to read verbatim what it says. Strahd's destruction is temporary, for his curse can't be so easily ended. The ancient dark powers with which Strahd forged his pact caused the vampire to reform after a period of months, long enough for the Barovians to discover what it feels like to live a life of hope. When Strahd is reborn, the mists surround the land of Barovia once more, and the Barovians' hope turns to horrible despair. Strahd remembers the defeat dealt to him and begins plotting his revenge. After the mists reappear, the Vistani once again come back to the valley. The beasts of the land once more fall under Strahd's spell, and the burgomasters fortify their settlements, hoping against all hope that someone can save them from Strahd again. This is how Curse of Strahd is supposed to end. This is what's written in the book. I'm going to explain a little bit of what's being discussed here. When we talk about the dark powers, here's what the book tells us about them. That they are born in the Amber Temple. Strahd forged a pact with them. They feed off of Strahd's evil. His existence sustains them. They are the ones who control the mists and blot out the sun. They are the ones who conjure the image of Strahd's lost kingdom in the mists west of Yester Hill, outside the boundaries of his domain. And Strahd does seek to escape Barovia and escape their influence over him. It is otherwise a little vague about what the dark powers are. They're kind of a collective evil energy that dwells within the Amber Temple. It is sort of indicated that they are separate from the vestiges, but maybe they're like created from the vestiges. It's kind of like as if the Amber Temple is so evil and has had so much evil in it for such a long time that that evil has like coalesced into sentience and malevolent power, like kind of dark godly power, and has the ability to do all these things that explain this campaign, to wrest Barovia from its own realm and create it as a demiplane within the Shadowfell. These are kind of the plot forces that govern the many otherwise unexplainable things that happen. They don't directly attribute everything in this game to the dark powers, but they are the only explanation that makes sense for many things. Hey, speak up if you feel like you know the full story of what was going on with this guy. Yeah. And there's a reason for that. So I explained that Ezek was having dreams about Irina for years, where he could see her very vividly, enough that he could have the Toymaker recreate her in her various incarnations over and over and over again. And he does not understand why he's getting these visions of her. A reason for why this happens is that Ezek and Irina, not Irina and Ismark, are brother and sister. They were separated at an early age. The wolf attack that cost Ezek his arm, which grew back later, unexplained, as a monstrous arm that could summon fire. In that fight, his sister ran into the woods to escape them and was never seen again. Irina, as a small child, was found in the woods near Barovia village by the burgomaster and adopted and raised ever since then, with no memory of what happened to her or how she got there, and was young enough that she couldn't really explain it or remember it anyway. What's up?
Was this actually the Curse of Strahd, or did you just rip off some telenovela? Because, like, I'm sick and tired of all these stupid twists. Like, they're twists for the sake of twists at this point.
And in fact, it's very difficult to know that this is the case, because it doesn't really necessarily indicate. It's kind of left up to you whether Ezek knows this is his sister. And at the very least, it explains the connection between the two of them, but not why he would have these dreams about her. These dreams and his arm that grows into this monstrous form are best explained by the dark powers. Other things that you encountered, like Dr. Flint finding his...
He should have said, hey, everybody.
Oh man, if only Ezek Strasny had seen Irina at any point in either game, or spoken any words to either party, been in the same room as you at a time where he wasn't actively being murdered. A lot could have happened that didn't.
Like a big sign around his neck or something,
There are lots of other things in Barovia that go without explanation, like Dr. Flint finding one of his childhood drawings at the side of the road, like people seeing themselves as corpses hanging from the gallows, or Ismark's severed head, or finding themselves laying in a coffin, or Vistani delivering a coffin full of bats that attacks one party member in particular. There are a lot of things written into Curse of Strahd, as all of those were, that are no explanation is offered for them. Another thing that I noticed while reading through Curse of Strahd, in the same way that I thought that's a little difficult to explain, is that in all sorts of unlikely places, it is possible to find, as just little items that you might pick up, little toys that were made by this individual. Deep in the catacombs in Ravenloft, or in the high towers, or out in strange places out in the woods, seemingly places that nobody would have gone to in quite some time. Pretty unlikely that those toys could have made it out there. Like, you could explain it, but there are other mysteries that need explaining as well, such as in Curse of Strahd, as it's written, there is an amber sarcophagus that has been shattered, and all it says is that there is an amber sarcophagus that has been shattered. It does not give any reason or explanation for it. It is specifically not vampire. They do tell you that vampire is in another one somewhere else. That would be the most likely, the most intuitive explanation, that when Strahd made his pact, it released vampire, and that has somehow occluded this land, but it is not, which leaves you to wonder, what else might it be? Speaking of the shattered sarcophagus, this is something that Alpha comes back to in their epilogue. We returned to the Amber Temple, seeking to tie up loose ends. At this point, Van Richten has the Tongues spell, which he casts now, and uses it to speak with the Nothics who inhabit this chamber. And we ask them a variety of questions, seeking to understand how is this sarcophagus shattered, but they don't themselves know that. They have been here trying to ascertain that. We get a little bit of their history, confirming that they were once wizards who defended this temple, but were corrupted by these secrets within, transformed into these terrible mutated forms. And we move away before we ask too many other questions, before those questions go in a certain direction, because we want to speak again with Exathanter. We have in our party a character who survived a encounter with a lich that very nearly cost him his life, that did cost him the lives of all his family, lost him his true eyes, and set him on a lifelong quest for vengeance. Action Jack, knowing that liches have to be sustained by the souls of others, that in fact the failure to maintain this ritual is likely what cost Exathanter his memories in the first place, knows that, believes that liches are evil incarnate, and that there is no good that can come of their continued existence. Van Richten has an extremely traumatic memory stemming from liches, and the temptation of leveraging their power toward your own ends, and perhaps has come to the conclusion that they are better not engaged with, that it is a deal with the devil to imagine that one could barter with them. We do still contemplate returning his memories. He knows things certainly about this temple that we don't know. He has the passwords to the many tomes in the library, which we do not have. And there is one member of the party who thinks that Exathanter is just a super duper cool guy. And as we speak with him again, he offers to Nyx that maybe he could tutor her in magic and be a mentor for her, kind of a parental figure who would engage with her interests and her passions and cultivate them. And it is kind of on the outskirts of him making that offer, and then also bumbling around the temple doing his own things, that we seek out, and we do locate successfully in a secret room, his phylactery. So we know that if we destroy his phylactery and then destroy him, he will not be able to rejuvenate with it. And Action votes to do this. And Van Richten seconds it. Nyx opposing, Lucian abstaining. Peregrine basically says, I think we're going to have to kill this guy. Nyx is outvoted. And we all do agree together on how to do this. We take Exothanter into the library and we construct a situation where he stands in the middle of all of us. And with a surprise round, everybody unleashes everything that they have.
Clear, she told him to close his eyes and imagine like the best scene that he could, and she tried to make it peaceful.
And
you probably imagine sucking people's souls out.
Yeah.
And as this barrage initiated against him, not understanding what was happening, he tried to shield Nyx with his body, but Exothanter has far fewer hit points than a normal Lich. This is a side effect of his degenerating power, and it doesn't take much time at all. He certainly doesn't get a round in before he is cut down and destroyed. This we see as the culmination of our unfinished business. We are done now, finally. And we begin going through player character epilogues. These two, rival scientists though they are, have formed an unlikely bond between one another. And while they stay as rivals, they perhaps agree to perhaps be collaborators at some point in the future. And they are returned to their homelands to continue in their works and go off on their studies, both changed by their experiences as they seek to take what they have learned out into the world and try to change their homelands. It is offered to Action that perhaps he could go along with the vampire hunters and join them in their quest, as Van Richten and Esmeralda seem ready to do that together, but he elects for now. I think my memory of this is he's like, maybe one day, but for now I'm going back with Daniel, and we're going to kind of go back and be cops for a while. We're going to kind of go back to some normal adventures for a bit. So Esmeralda...
They had like a little bit of an energy, you know, that I was like, I don't know if I want to make this like a threesome with this experience.
The two of them maybe need some time on their own, yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah. So Esmeralda, as the resident Vistani in the party, takes it upon herself to ferry these people back to their original lands and make sure they're going to get where they need to go. This leaves our other two members of the party alone with each other for a little bit. And Van Richten and Nyx decide that they do want to take it upon themselves to try to get the Amber Temple in better order than it is right now. Without its steward, Exothanter, they are of the opinion that something has to be done to figure out like what knowledge is here, make sure that the wrong knowledge doesn't make it out there into the world, to try to secure this place a little better than it has been, maybe do some more investigation here. And in the course of working that up, so we've fully already done the epilogues and kind of sunset on the rest of the party at this point, but we go back to the Nothics and speak with them again, and this time the questions manage to wind their way to the particular name of the creature that they actually do have an opinion of who escaped from the sarcophagus. And though it did appear on that document a long time ago, we were reminded of this name Gansky. And we make a connection now that we didn't back then, but it doesn't make very much sense to us. Some weeks have passed now, and we go back to our mansion at Wachthouse in Vallaki in the pursuit of, picking up supplies and seeing people off and other things that we need to do. And while we're in Vallaki, which has mostly been evacuated, we haven't really pushed that super strongly, but most people, just as a matter of course, have left. Somebody who seems to have remained and seems comfortable remaining is Gadolf Blinsky himself. And this is a more strained encounter than we've ever had with him. He's still his normal friendly self for the most part, but we're a little leery of him because we kind of have a suspicion of him now that it's hard to even put into words. And as it's become obvious that this conversation isn't really going to go anywhere, he kind of ends it by saying, somewhat out of nowhere and cryptically, like, oh, if I don't know if you guys were planning to stick around or to leave, but if you were going to set out on a journey, it is a new moon tomorrow, and my mother always told me that it is bad luck to wait until after a new moon to make a journey. So if you were going to leave, I would suggest that you do it before then. And he departs. And they go, maybe we will leave. Maybe we'll just kind of skip out of town for a minute here. And they do. And we get a cutscene that none of these characters are present for, but is emblematic of what happens next, which is that Strahd is reborn out of mist and thunder and lightning and rain. He is restored to flesh and looks around bewildered and is greeted by Gadolf Blinsky, who tells him basically like, oh, you're not getting out of this that easy. And you were soundly defeated, and they did everything that they, needed to do. And this land is a lot emptier now than it was. And Strahd doesn't know who he's talking to. He doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't really understand what's happened. And he is infuriated by this man who seems to be taunting him. And he promises destruction, raining down every fury upon this man. And Blinsky says, that's a great speech. It gets better every time I hear it. And then Blinsky is gone. And Strahd, looking around, doesn't seem to remember the encounter he's just had with him, and is left now in a mostly empty Barovia with no chance left of reclaiming his lost obsession with Tatiana, with very few people left to torment, and just sort of left in this empty, hollow realm, knowing that he can be defeated and destroyed, and that even this does not release him from his prison. And we simply end there. There is no more. I'm going to talk now about what happened in the Prime campaign.
We figured that shit out forever ago.
In the Prime campaign, we go very quickly after the defeat of Strahd to Vallaki, to Gadolf Blinsky. And we say to him...
Everybody who died in the previous fight.
Yeah. And we say to him, hey, are you an evil god? And he goes, what? And they say, well, just in the Amber Temple, we found evidence that an evil god escaped, and they had a name kind of like your name. And what's your dark power? What's your, dark gift that you give? And he's like, okay, well, it's this guy. And he picks up this little dude who they brought with him. And he says, I can give people the knowledge of how to create constructs that have an above average sort of intelligence and free will that most others do not. And he commends them on their boldness and their cleverness for figuring out his role in all of this. But he takes control of the conversation from here, and he says to them, you have done very well. You have accomplished a lot here. I am going to put my cards on the table for what is going on with me. What is happening here is I have kept to the part where it says the dark powers are sustained by Strahd's evil. Gadolf Blinsky has a vested interest in maintaining a sort of status quo within Barovia. So he says this to them. He says, in 1 month, I will resurrect Strahd. I would discourage you from imagining that you could do anything to prevent me from doing this. You will not find it's a good use of your time. What I will offer to you is this. What I really want is an immortal plaything. I want a way to pull the strings in this realm that won't keel over after a brief 100 years. I want to be able to keep this thing going like I've done with Strahd. He is my chosen puppet for this. I really like him for this. And you guys have the full opportunity to evacuate everybody from the land, knowing that I will bring him back. You have the ability, the choice to leave him in a totally empty prison, if that's your choice. Or, if you wanted to allow him to stay destroyed and fully removed of his curse, you could give me a replacement. And that replacement would need to be immortal. I leave the rest to you. And he disappears and is not available for further conversation on this. And try as they might, they are not able to find him again for the rest of the month. We go and have some very urgent conversations with certain people. Notably these people. And we tell them what is going on, and we ask them to get fucking everybody out of Barovia. And they go, oh, okay.
They exist.
What's that?
We raised them, that's why they're alive.
Yeah, we bring everybody back from the dead. All the people who died, especially the Mardikovs.
Just about everybody, too.
Who were blown the fuck up in the Strahd fight. And we put them on the... And we tell them very strongly, like, you need to leave Barovia too. You and everybody, for whatever reason they may have for staying, you need to get out. We talked to Lady Voctor, and she's like, oh, I'm so glad you destroyed Strahd. Oh, I'm so happy about that. Well, at least we can rule over Vallaki, you know, you as my instruments and me as the noble who runs things from behind the scenes. And they go, great, we have to evacuate everybody from Vallaki. And she's like, why? What? What are we talking about? And they go, well, Strahd's going to come back. And she goes, oh, is he? Oh no. But we kind of, they get her to agree to get everybody out, but she makes it clear she's going to kind of drag her feet on that. But she also becomes aware at this point that compared to these people who destroyed Strahd, she doesn't really have any real cards to play. She's just going to try to drag things out as long as she thinks she can get away with. So that's kind of left in process. We try a couple of things. We try a couple of loose ends to see if they can help us in any way to understand the situation. We revisit Madame Ava, which is where Prime learns some of the stuff that we already discussed about Madame Ava at the beginning, like her history with Strahd and all this. And she does reveal, she says, yes, I am actually immortal. I am going to tell you that the method by which I am immortal will not work for you. And I am sorry. She does not reveal that is because she made a bargain with Mother Night. She is confident enough that the PCs don't have this relationship with her goddess that they could ask for the same thing, and she doesn't want them distracted thinking that's a possibility. So she turns out to be a dead end. Another avenue that we have left open in Prime suggests itself, and we go deep into the swamps in the lowlands of Barovia, and we seek out someone who wandered off from a fight long ago and has been living dejected, not in her ruined hut, but just in another new little one she has built for herself deep in the woods. Baba Lysaga yet lives. And she perks up seeing they are paying her attention again. She is absolutely devastated by Strahd's destruction, but she is encouraged that Shava would come and seek her out again. She still hopes to have a relationship with Shava, and so she suggests this. She says, if you wanted to be immortal, Shava, I could teach you a blood ritual that I know. It is how I am immortal. It takes blood sacrifice periodically to maintain my life. But with that, perhaps you could, if you wished, meet this person's demands, and then we could, be buddy-buddy in that way. And Shava's like, no.
Nope.
But like very, very softly and gently about it. And we decide that's not something
We can chat, but I'm not blood sacrificing.
Yeah, that's not something we really want to explore, because we really aren't interested in taking up Gazgauna's deal, really. We're trying to figure out a way to subvert it, perhaps. We end up coming back to the Amber Temple, and we speak with Exothanter again. And in this game, this is fully restored Exothanter, who is much colder and more commanding and more logical and more threatening. And he is extremely opposed to revealing any more secrets of the Amber Temple to them, but he does remember the favor that they dealt him by restoring his faculties. Certainly he's a better curator of the temple now than he was without his memories. And they attempt persuasion, and they roll very well. And he says, okay, what I will do is this. I will allow one of you to go commune with the spirit vampire and learn what you want to learn from them. To that person who we push talks forward for this, he says, if I find out that you have ever shared this with anybody, I am coming for you. And you should take that very seriously, as I am taking my job very seriously. And Tox seems to take it quite seriously. But he does venture down into that lower tomb, and he does commune with the spirit of vampire, who does reveal to him the ritual that is required to become a vampire. They are still hoping to find, I think, some explanation for Strahd's power and Strahd's transformation, but we're starting to let other ideas creep in as well. This will be the first time for anybody but Derek learning exactly what is required of this ritual, although members of Prime from what happens next may be able to guess at some elements of it. There are only 2 steps. They have to be done in order. You have to kill someone who loves you and drink their blood. Victor, learning this from the sarcophagus in his sociopathic, soulless way, went back to the party and started being really nice to them in the hopes that they would love him so that he could then kill them and drink their blood.
Man, Victor and Van Richten are birds of a feather. They were made for each other.
So good.
The second step is even more simple. Having done this first step, you have to then be killed by someone who hates you. Having failed to get anybody else to do it, Victor was hoping to kill his mother, who he knows loves him and would do anything for him, and then drink her blood, after which he was pretty confident that he could find somebody, perhaps possibly even one of you, to fulfill this second step for him, which, if the timing had worked out different and he could have gotten away with this, could have made for a very different ending to the Alpha campaign and a very different termination of Victor's arc. With this knowledge, which Derek keeps fully to himself, the two of us are DMing back and forth kind of questions around this, we are met once again by the Mardikovs, who come back to us and say, we've set the wheels in motion that people will be evacuated from Barovia. But given that you have shared the whole story with us of what you believe will happen, we have, as a family, unanimously decided to stay. If Strahd returns and this land is blanketed in despair once again, and if he maintains the ability to allow people into it, then those people will need guides. There won't be any hope in an empty land. And we have weathered this for so long, we know how to do it. And we, having seen it done once, think that perhaps we could do it again. And knowing that this is a place where we could make a difference, we feel that we must. At any rate, we have decided to stay. Coming off of this scene, Tox is lost in thought. And we kind of see like some time pass in montage as he deliberates things. And we arrive at a scene where Shava is asking him, like, what is it that you need to do? Is it like really bad? Like kill a child bad? Like, what are we talking here? And Tox is kind of hemming and hawing his way around these questions, but he brings her with him to Rudolph Van Richten, although we kind of understand that the whole rest of the party is here as well. And he asks Rudolph Van Richten, like, hey, we found a bunch of diamonds in Ravenloft, so you can continue, as you've been doing in this epilogue, kind of bringing people back from the dead who can be restored to life, right? Would you be willing still to do that? if we called upon you for it? And Van Richten's like, sure. Yeah, of course I would. Yeah, of course I would help somebody in this way. Tox turns, and I think at 5th level, casts Witch Bolt into Shava.
What the fuck?
And she, engaging in initiative with him, and the whole rest of the party deciding, despite their shock at what is happening, not to intervene, she allows it to continue. She does not attempt to counter the spell. She decides to trust in whatever Tox is doing.
No, I slug him in the face first.
That's true.
I was like, I have an idea of what's going on, but you didn't warn me, and I'm going to punch you in the face over it.
Not enough, and she knows this, to stop what is happening. And
I do 4 damage on an arm strike, not a chance.
Mm-hmm. And Tox kills Shava. And then gets down and pricks her and slurps up 1 drop of her blood. It is like kind of like gagging the whole time, was my impression. And then he turns to Van Richten and says, "Bring her back from the dead, please, right now." And Van Richten's like, "What the fuck?" And he brings Shava back from the dead. And Van Richten...
Tox gets punched again.
Yeah. And Van Richten turns on Tox and he's like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And Tox explains that this is going to make him a vampire and allow him to take Strahd's place in this land. And that in the whole party at this point, we've kind of had enough of a vibe around this that they are saying like, and we will stay with you to support you in this. And Van Richten saying like, why do you think you're going to end up any better than Strahd? They say because he won't be alone. He'll have his friends to help him with this. And Van Richten fully goes to draw steel, and he says, "Old man that I am, I will make a poor final boss, but I will do what I must to stop you from doing this." The Curse of Strahd was not just some magic upon him, but the power that comes with this sacrifice. Anyone who has this kind of power will be corrupted by it. And they say, we're going to take the chance on that because we hope that staying together as friends, we can find a way together to overcome that. And I think this is our final, like, above 25 persuasion result in this campaign. And he backs down, and Tox says, "I need you to bring back one more person from the dead for me. Could you bring back Isaac Strasny?" And Van Richten says, "Okay." And he does. And Isaac Strasny returns to life and goes like, "Ah!" And Tox is like, "Ah, fuck you." And Isaac Strasny goes, "Ah!" And he grabs Tox and with his mighty hand just snaps his neck and kills him.
You're missing an important part where he grabbed Tox by the neck and said, "Give me one reason that I won't kill you right now." And Tox says, "I don't know, because you're a little bitch."
And with that, we sunset on a bit of an abstract scene talking about the legends that emerged from Barovia after that, of the continued presence of a dread lord who commands the mists and walks in shadow and does not wield the same dread powers that Strahd did, but does command great magic and the ability to change his shape from one form to another. You never know whether he walks among your company or not. And also of his powerful advisors who stay with him in Barovia to try to help him keep his sanity. Ascended to the throne of Ravenloft, the vampire, the dread lord, Tox, holds sway in Ravenloft. And that's where our campaign ends. So I know there were some feelings at the end of Alpha, like we got the bad ending. There was something that we missed until it was too late, and there were possibilities that were open to us that we didn't get to capitalize on. And there is a little bit of that, and, you know, I won't diminish that. was kind of a puzzle in there of something extra going on. I hope it assuages it somewhat to know that this is a bit of content that I added because the ending of Curse of Strahd as written was so fucking bleak. And this is a subject of great contention. I've seen a lot of people arguing about this on Reddit in our Curse of Strahd. Like, do we like this ending or not? It maybe, if we think of Strahd as the main character, is a better ending and makes more sense for him to be trapped in the cycle of torment and there's nothing anybody can do about it. Certainly it fits this horror trope where even though it seems like there's a way through things and a puzzle you can do to solve things, in the end, the despair is always going to come back. This death is always going to be inevitable. Any glimpse of hope you thought you had is wiped out at the end. Suddenly the monster appears again inexplicably and kills the hero. And it kind of has echoes of that. So it comes down to personal taste. But for me, I wanted at least to have something outside of it where it puts some agency back in your hands, hopefully, where... in one situation, Strahd is left in a prison of his own making forever, and you have, at the very least, freed all the souls who were once trapped here. Those mists, those wandering spirits are released to go to whatever afterlife they should rightfully inherit. Irina, in both campaigns, is saved, and she is kind of the emotional heart of this story, and that is fully brought through in both stories. So beyond that, there's a bit of a question of, do we do this to release Strahd? Is somebody willing to take his place? Because there are some campaigns where, and this is kind of where this idea came from, they, without any encouragement at all to do this, went, I want to be the Dreadlord of Barovia, and they took dark gifts and they overthrew Strahd and they instilled themselves, and, they took on all that gothic drip. So for some people, that's certainly a fantasy to be lived out. In Prime, they started their final session, and I found myself in a position of going, hey, you guys, remember the details of the deal that Gadoff made to you, right? And they go like, oh, well, we haven't for a moment even considered entertaining that any of us would do that. And then over the course of 2 hours, fully talked themselves into doing it. It really threw me for a loop.
I thought about it beforehand because I was like, do I change my patron to make this work? Because there's an entire warlock line that gives you immortality, and everyone told me maybe don't do that.
No. I think that in Alpha, even if we had known about this deal, I think that Alpha would have had a very hard time. Yeah.
I was gonna say that earlier. I was like, even if we had been like, he might be a dark god, we would have been like, ooh, let's avoid that. I don't know why we would.
Yeah, that would have felt that would have been a Tuesday.
I'm not gonna we're not gonna just walk up to a dark god and be like, "What's up, man? We're fucking with your steez around."
See, that's where I think the two campaigns had a similar. The two parties had a similar arc, but in opposite directions, because Prime started out a little overcautious and then was sort of like, yeah, let's go talk to a dark god by the end, whereas I feel like Alpha started out a little more adventurous and then got a little more cautious toward the end. But it was I think one of the other things for Talks too is Talks was, and correct me if I'm wrong in remembering this, Derek, but Talks was reviled in the world that we had come from and really had nothing positive to go back to, and so I think that's part of what made the idea attractive to him, that he could try and make a difference in this way.
And I think for any character in Alpha, this would have been a much more significant sacrifice, not just of your future, but of your convictions. I think that as a group, this would have been a very difficult decision, and for any individual, it would have been a very difficult decision. Not the least because you're sacrificing yourself to, maybe to help Barovia, but also to save Strahd from this cyclical fate.
Well, but here's what I don't understand is so Gadoff is like, hey, yeah, I'm a dark god and I want an immortal plaything, and I'm like, okay, so if Tox is replacing Strahd, then So first, does he keep his memory that Blinsky is a dark god that's just going to be doing what? Just like fucking with him? Like what? I don't
If
understand.
I remember correctly, we kind of were like, hey, we'll keep, like, we won't tell anybody else, we'll keep playing your game. And it'll, like, it's still not going to be, like,
So,
not fun for you, if I remember correctly.
the internal thought process for all of this was basically, okay, brass tacks here. Goal is to minimize harm to people of Barovia, the ones who choose to stay. The guaranteed way to not do that is let Strahd come back. So that must be avoided. How do we avoid this? Okay, we need a replacement for Strahd. Might as well be me. I got nothing better to do. I can't remember whether I said that in this recap or just in the Prime specific one, but as a changeling, Tox's prior, we'll call it occupation, was as a crash test dummy for the Izzet Guild in Ravnica. So like this is a much better use of Tox's existence. I'm like, okay, well, if we get all of the crew to help keep his sanity, at the very least, it will be less bad for the people of Barovia than if Strahd is back. And doesn't hurt that Vampire might be like a step up the power tier list towards maybe eventually doing something about Blinsky, but the guarantee is that this will be better for the people of Barovia than keeping Strahd.
I pretty purposefully, after having Gadoff drop the deal, took him out because I didn't want to get any kind of elaboration conversations on this. And after the moment of like kind of saying what happens with like the fact that Tox's ritual does succeed, because the cap of this all is that after Tox is killed, I turn to Ashley and say, hey, Ashley, does Shava love Tox? And she says, of course, he's my best friend. And that's the only reason that the ritual succeeds. Otherwise, Tox would just be fucking dead. And like from that, we acknowledge, yes, the ritual does succeed. And here is kind of a snippet of what that future looks like. But I ended the campaign right there because I don't want to, as the dungeon master, answer any kind of questions like that. Like, does Gadoff erase your memories of his existence and kind of do to you what he did to Strahd? Are things different? Because any one of those will start to kind of paint another picture of like, what were the consequences of this decision? And I think I'm at the point where I don't want to be a part of that conversation. I want you guys to have that conversation of what do we think the likely outcomes are? Do we feel like, this is something that would be sustainable going forward? What would the challenges be? I think that it's something that absolutely deserves to be talked about. And I had hoped to create a situation where this would feel like a choice that had a lot of unknowns to it and had a lot of moral gray areas to it. Because I don't think it's so easy. And I don't think if Alpha had got to this point of having this opportunity that it would have been very easy for them to do. And I don't really know whether or not they would have done that. I would be interested to hear you guys converse at some point about whether you think you would have or not. We have gone a little bit over time here and we are close to the end, but I kind of iterating on that point, want to say that for both of these were extremely effective endings for me. I think that for Prime, there was this question throughout of, can we free Strahd from this curse by making them the game in which he was portrayed as possibly being a little more sympathetic, just a smidge more sympathetic right at the beginning. They had this question throughout of, can we relieve him of his curse? And they ultimately did answer that question. For Alpha, it always seemed more important the dynamics of the characters interacting with one another. Nyx being kind of an innocent child with some passionate, chaotic tendencies, and Action being a often overbearing leader, and the two of them coming to the situation at the end where Action sticks his guns on believing this is the right thing to do to destroy Exithanter, even if it costs them this information, and Nyx kind of having a rite of passage of maturity in having to accept that, but also kind of being left with the emotional fallout of that whole situation is a character moment and between those two that I'll never forget. And the whole party, everybody had aspects to that that they got to share in. And we also had Van Richten's relationship with Esmeralda. We had Lucian and Peregrine's relationship with one another, and both of them maturing incredibly through the whole campaign. So, comparing the two, I think it's only possible to do that through the lens of this scoreboard that I made. So by this, we can clearly see that Alpha has a number of points that were accumulated, but both parties lost points for killing Rahadin too early. So we kind of ended up with things on either side. The math of this actually turns out it is a tie. Both parties end up with the same number of points. So congratulations. That's pretty incredible that it worked out that way. But a really remarkable performance from both of you guys. Anyway, here's my master list of crushes, and this is my crushes list, and I hope to see one from each of you, kind of throwing your opinions in here. But this is the final slide. This is slide 439. So with that, we have finished our Curse of Strahd recap, and I want to thank you all for remembering this game with me. I'll give everybody a moment to screenshot this, including the typo that somebody made spelling out problematic in this template. And I'll skip back to this.
Why is Escher whack? He's cool. He wears purple.
Asher's really whack. Come on. Oh yeah.
I look forward to the Escher spin-off arc, wherever he fucks off to.
Yeah.
We killed 10 NPC allies?
I did the math. A lot of berserkers died to boost your score as high as it was.
Okay, sure.
They only had one of those berserkers die?
You guys had 4 berserkers die. 3 of them were from the same chain lightning really early on, so...
But they only had one die? How did they beat them?
No, they didn't even have them.
We blew up a bunch of them before they were NPC allies. They were still enemies at the time.
Yes, oh yeah. That was the different... They killed them themselves, so couldn't really call them allies.
Okay, so we did count PC deaths, included the epilogue deaths.
Oh yeah. Shava died twice in this campaign, so Shava gets a special prize.
Robots destroyed.
Wait,
is that the two times that Helper was destroyed, or are you talking about other robots?
I only remember Helper being destroyed 2 times, and I didn't count any other robots. Other constructs are not robots.
Also,
Yeah, fine.
100% died twice.
And I like the cross column because
That's
the
true.
only ones who got points were your third campaign. We did not.
Yeah.
Pretty. Yeah.
You only get 1 point for destroying Dreadlord of Barovia.
That's just a number. There's only one of them.
That's quad for you, man. Yeah.
That's fewer. You got fewer points for that one than you did having Hellbender destroyed a bunch.
Wait, so what's Winter Splinter's column? We preempted Winter Splinter.
No, Winter Splinter was never created in Prime. No, you never beat Winter Splinter. You beat up a statue that would have been Winter Splinter.
He stole his heart. He never got to exist.
It wasn't his. Yeah, because he never existed. It wasn't his heart.
How could you defeat something that was not ever dead? Wasn't?
I would engage.
I like our children saved column.
Yeah, I think it looked pretty good. I think it looked pretty good on paper, guys.
Child saved. She was easily the 10 of the others.
So I am still pretty cheesed about that because I was like, okay, so we get onto the lake, and we're following tracks, right? And Alan's like, yeah, there's a guy in the lake, and he throws a wriggling sack into the lake, and we're like, okay, is that maybe he's fishing in a weird way?
He was.
The word wriggling is specifically used in a way that is that's what I would describe. Maybe it's like a sack of worms. I don't know. He didn't say that's not like a person-sized sack. It could be just a little bag of worms. And I'm like, okay.
If we had been walking by there at any other point in the campaign and this had happened, we would have stopped. So we were on a mission to save.
Oh yeah. Certainly, I imagine if the DM had directly intervened and said, "You guys should go to the lake," maybe he would have thought it was more of an important thing.
Oh, sure.
I mean, mean, I guess like maybe we should have asked like what size is the sack, but I was just like, okay, it's like a sack, like a little sack of worms that he's dropping into the water. Maybe he's got a weird fishing technique, you know.
Also, I do think our disillusionment.
It's just a tea bag.
Yeah,
Our disillusionment was starting to set into, and it's just like, oh, that's probably something horrible anyway.
Yeah. But if this was like, this sack looks like it's about like 60 pounds.
Like child-sized.
It's got little kicking legs, you know. He's gonna be like, well, okay, maybe we'll do something about that.
And how many other people in distress did Lucian walk away from before that? Like, I came upon the crow people, and one of them was screaming and on fire, and they were nursing him to health, and Lucian was just like, no, it's time for bed.
This isn't happening. Alan, you worked so hard on this, thank you. You're such a good man.
I don't want to talk about how much time I spent on these last 2 slides in particular. I do want to thank each and every one of you for taking part in this experience. It wouldn't have been what it was without each and every one of you. So thank you for the time and the passion you poured into this. Thank you all.
You're great.
I do...
You, Alan.
Yeah. Claps for Alan.
Claps for Alan.
I would be talking with all of you guys about this game for a long, long time. I have been working on and posting to YouTube the video recaps of our previous sessions. I still have, I think, one of them left that I have to finish, but I will send a link when those are all done, and then y'all could come back and rewatch any of these at any point if you wanted to. I will also be in touch in the channel just talking about future games that we might run or sessions we may hold of various get-together things. I do have other plans for things I want to do that I hope we can roll on into, so I'll be in touch about that. But for tonight, I think that's enough. I am absolutely hoping that we can continue talking about these things in whatever chats or whatever hangouts we have past this point. But for now, thank you all for playing this game with me. I love you all tremendously.
I loved hearing the other story too. It's good.
Yeah, this was really fun.
It was awesome.
Yeah, that really made it. Yeah.
Also, thanks for bringing me into this. I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining. We loved having you.
And from now on, Alan can just double every campaign that he runs.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
It's an open invitation.
Easy.
Yeah, I think we'll do, after every session of our next doubled campaign, we'll do a recap, though, so that we don't have to wait till the end to do it. We'll just...
No, not even as a joke. Not even as a joke. That's the thing that you get. I love you. But oh my god. Well, let the man breathe, y'all. I love you, but let him breathe first.
I said let him cook. Let him cook.
Let's see the like.
Cook for me.
Yeah, let's see how far you go. Let's see how far we can let him.
I think we have seen it.
Is this Strahd? Is this Strahd?
Oh my god.
Yeah.
So you're gonna say, Luke?
I was gonna say it's another case where everyone votes against Nyx.
So if we can replace. Yeah. It's familiar for some reason.
Monster understandable and monster problematic should be switched, but maybe that's just
Well,
me.
no, make your own list. I'm sure everybody's list will look different and be wrong because this is the correct one. Everybody have a great night.
All right, good night, Alan. Good night,
Bye.
everybody.
Milk?
Good night.